at all in telling us about your life, your struggles, your journey, and even about your sex.
Right.
And there's one part that was so steamy, you know, that like, man, I had to put the book down and sort of...
Chapter 6.
Yes, so if you're buying this, just go to chapter 6, you know. You don't need only fans for this. But you didn't, why was it important for you not to hold back and just pour yourself really into this?
You shouldn't use the expression pour yourself in this context. That's easy. So what happens when you're writing a book, you reach this stage when you're by yourself in a room and the publisher's not there, the editor's not there, so you stop self-censoring. And then you really start saying, this is what happened. In a way you wouldn't if there were email conversations between yourself and the publisher or other stakeholders. So it was just, I don't know, I guess when there was no one else watching over my shoulder, that's the level of honesty I could reach. Yeah.
And then you were in the South African military at one time.
I was.
Have colleagues from that also come to you and said, hey, Brad, thank you so much for the work that you've done?
Not really. Not really. It's a strange situation. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but I believe there are two types of citizens. There are people who work for government and people who work in other spaces. And people who work for government have a vested interest in keeping quiet about the way their government performs or doesn't perform in many instances. So there's just a code of silence, I feel, and you feel it. And if you've written, so a lot of what I've written here is what I observe.
Silence.
I think because people don't really, because you don't feel like yourself. I can only speak from my own perspective. When I'm depressed or when I'm grieving, I always feel like look at my hand, it's almost like I'm on mushrooms. Like I'm floating above my own body. And I'm always catching up to my own body. And I think because we're not in touch with ourselves when we are depressed or when we are grieving, it is hard to understand how to really feel when you're having sex, when you're depressed, and when you're not understanding yourself, or when you're not in tune with yourself. And that's from my personal, obviously, my own experience. But in general, talking about sex is hard. Writing about sex is even harder. And trusting people with your stories about sex is the hardest. But here we are, creating and compiling books about that, hoping that it can educate, it can inform, and make you hard or wet or whatever it is that happens to you.
I like the fact that writing about sex is hard. Why, as a writer, as someone who's also looking into exploring your own writing, as you told me earlier on, why is it hard? Why do people find it hard?
Okay, I don't find it hard to write about sex because I love writing about sex. It's very easy for me to write about my experiences. So personally, I don't struggle with it. But I think because sex touches us on so many levels, it's the traumatic aspect thereof. A lot of us have traumatic experiences that we haven't dealt with, that we don't have money to go to therapy for and figure it out first before we write a piece about it, you know? Sex can touch us because maybe we're gender diverse and we haven't really tried to understand our bodies, or there is no literature out there for us to understand our bodies, and so we don't really know how to feel comfortable with someone touching me somewhere where I don't even like that part of my body, for example. So sex is a very difficult topic to write about because it takes a lot of work to get to the point where you're actually comfortable to write about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know we'll be talking a lot more about sex during this weekend and literature and sex. When do we see you again?
I will be
live, but empty inside, with no dialogue, no conflict or resolution in their stories, no depth or plot to confuse the past. Describe in detail naked breasts, young, old, conservative, recently raped, big, small, or mutilated genitals, or enhanced genitals, or any kind of genitals, and dead bodies. Oh, or better, naked dead bodies, and especially rotten, naked, dead bodies. Remember, any work you submit which in which people look filthy and miserable will be referred to as a real Africa. And you want that on your dust jacket. Don't feel cozy about this. You are trying to help them to get aid from the West. The biggest taboo in writing about Africa is to describe